Hello everyone, with you today is International Master Giorgi Sibashvili on the channel WeChess, and this time I would like to show you the continuation of the previous stream, Checkmates in 2. Last time we have covered a decent amount of material, exactly 50 positions where more or less only few pieces were standing on the board, and it was kind of direct. This time I would like to take your attention towards more challenging positions where there are a couple of opportunities, more pieces on the board, and more or less challenging situations. So for that, I specifically chose some certain amount of positions, and we will go over. Well, for the first example, we have the situation where we play with the black pieces. And as you can see, we've got the queen, 2 rooks, and there are a lot of pieces on the board. We just need to make sure that we are going to deliver check first to this enemy's king. The last move was rook e3, which is quite important to realize, because without it, we will not be able to, navigate through properly. The rook is covering up the second rank really well, and this king on f3 currently looks a little bit safer, but we need to somehow break through. So if we decide to go for something like rook f2 check, it's not going to work out well long term. So we need something more or less immediate. Therefore, we can try to go for queen takes e3. This is kind of a sacrifice, but a good looking move, because right after that, when the king takes on e3, we have got rook a3. After rook a3, the king has no good squares to go, nowhere else, because all the key squares will be covered up, and black just wins the game on spot. Moving on to the next example. Bishop takes on c8. So as you can see, it's more or less challenging ones, but I am sure we got this. And for most of you, ladies and gentlemen, I am quite certain that it's going to be absolutely fine without any difficulties. So we see that enemy's king stands quite poorly on g1 and doesn't actually have a lot of good squares to escape. That's why we need to kind of hurry up and do something almost immediately. What can we try? If we go for the move like bring the knight into the action, maybe something like knight c4, it wouldn't really change much because there is no check. The king has only one good escape square, which is on g2, and we need to seize the momentum and do something about it. The bishop is covering up really well. Therefore, we can try to go for rook a1 check, where the king cannot come up, plus all the key squares are covered on the first rank, and it forces white to go for rook b1. Therefore, after rook takes b1, it's going to be a checkmate. So we go for rook a1, and right after rook b1, we just take it. Next example, rook takes c4. So as we can see, there are plenty of pieces on the board, and it's not so simple to navigate through, but we need to focus on the enemy's king. How is it possible to deliver mate in 2? First things first, we can try to investigate in rook takes g7 idea, but it will not take us far away, because the key reason is that the king will be taking back, and what do we do next? Well, I guess nothing really major. That's why we need to try some different options. The knight can jump on f6 along with queen going on h7. But if we try queen h7, the king will take it back, so we can't continue. We will lack the amount of pieces, therefore no good continuation. That's why here we can try knight f6 check. Such a classy move. Black can't recapture because pawn is pinned to the king, and we are using this momentum. Right after knight f6, black can respond with king h8, but we can go queen h7. It is really mandatory in the situations to seize the momentum and not let your opponent to escape from that pressure. Because if that happens, we don't really get a good follow-up, and black will save the position indeed. So let's have a look at this current situation. For example, let's go for knight f6, king goes on h8, and a beautiful mate, the combination of the knight and the rook. Next example, bishop takes f3. Okay, we have plenty of pieces on the board, but as I mentioned earlier, you don't have to focus on the pawns or anything like that. In terms of checking out what is the rook on a1 doing or anything like that. You just want to get as close as possible and make something immediate work. Therefore, here, it definitely makes more sense to go for simply bishop takes f7. Especially it comes with a check. The king can't escape on any good square. And right after that, let's say king going on f8, we can try to bring another bishop on g7, and it will be such a beautiful scenario. There are no other good options. Let's say if we try to take it with the knight on f7, not much changes. We can try to grab on h7, but again, the same kind of issues we are going to face. Therefore, it is mandatory at this point to take on f7 with the bishop. The king goes on f8. Other options are possible, something like knight e6 or knight h7, but we can't make it because in this case the bishop no longer will be protected on f7, and therefore we will just lose the game on spot. That's why it is mandatory to play a bit differently. So we go for bishop g7 mate. Next one, king going on b3. For anyone who ever attends this live stream, please do not be shy to write down any kind of comment, whatever you would like to. Feel free to mention it. If you have some suggestions, perhaps you feel like this is exactly how it should be played in order to win the game, etc. Any of these comments, there are no bad questions. Just feel free to write it down in the chat whenever possible. Okay, so let's have a look at another scenario where we have actually a plenty of pieces on the board, but enemy's king doesn't really feel so comfortable being on this square. So what can we do? Only normal resource of giving a check is queen a4, because the rook does cover the b2 square, but there is no good follow-up. Pushing the pawn will give us nothing at all. So queen a4, as we pointed out in the past, in the previous streams, that if we want to deliver mate, especially with the queen, it's important to bring the queen as close to the enemy's king as possible. And that definitely will give us this opportunity indeed. So we start with queen a4 check, and when the king escapes, we have a couple of options. Either we can try to go for b4, or potentially rook c2 or queen c2. All these moves have its own upsides and downsides. If we try to go for queen c2, for instance, white's king will be able to escape on d4 and even on b4, so we don't have a good follow-up. So if we try to go for something like queen c2, where does the king go? d4 even, and it's going to be fine. If we try to go for b4, that also looks quite tempting, but not a good idea at the end of the day, because enemy's queen will be taking on b4 and there is no good option. Instead, we can try to use our rook because the queen is covering up the key squares already, and the h2 rook does a tremendous job cutting the second rank, but bringing it closer, it's going to be significantly better. So rook c2 with the checkmate on the board. Moving on to the next example. The rook takes on g1. Probably our first instinct should be that, okay, well, we can just capture this rook on g1 and it's going to be fine, especially we just lost the rook right there, so something must be done. Well, the situation is not as clear as it looks. So how should we play? In this situation, it is better to go for the king immediately. Queen f6 check. Does it work? Not really. The knight is there. Queen b4 check. Well, on the first glance it's good, but there is queen c5 covering up everything. How about we try a little bit different approach and try to go for an immediate move, queen takes f7. That actually is going to work out really well, because right after playing queen f7, black is forced to tuck the king back on d8, and that's when we are going to use the momentum and bring the queen even closer, because we know that bring the queen closer is going to help us a lot. So queen f7, and right after king d8, thanks to the knight covering up the c7 outpost, we can go for queen e8, and it will be a checkmate on the board. Beautiful combination of the bishop and the queen all together, and it worked out extremely well. And at the end of the day, just white wins the game, because all these combinations are not so easy to calculate through, but still, it's mandatory to look at all the different opportunities. All right, so moving on to the next one. Okay, king goes on f8. We have got 2 rooks, the bishop, plenty of checks available right there, so it's mandatory to respond properly. Well, in this situation, actually, how can white continue? We have 2 important checks. One, it is to go for rook g8, and another is to go for rook f7 as well. If we try to go for rook g8, there comes king on e7. And the main downside of it is that when the king goes on e7, it kind of escapes. We can't really do a good follow-up. We can try to grab the rook on b8, but it's really far away from checkmating too. On the other hand, if we try to take on f7 first, and then realizing that the king actually cannot recapture because it's well guarded, black is forced to move the king on e8, and we are going to bring another rook into the action on g8 with the checkmate on the board. Therefore, a rook f7 followed by rook g8 is going to be a game changer indeed. So we start with it, and a really beautiful combination of the rooks will lead to an easier victory. Next example, rook d7. This is a little bit trickier one. Having the queen, rook, and the bishop, all of them together standing, and it does look like we should be able to somehow win the game, but rook d7 kind of defends the pawn on f7. One of the first move which comes in mind is queen f7, because this is supported by the bishop, but the rook is covering up really well along the 7th rank, so this is not going to work. How about queen f8 check? Not really. King takes it, and we get nothing at the end of the day. That's why we need to hurry up and use the fact that the rook is actually covering up really well the queen, but not the pawn on f7. So if we go for bishop takes f7, rook cannot capture it back. This is really crucial momentum. Right after that, the king goes on h8, and we're going to play queen f8 later with a simple checkmate on the board. And especially using the fact that black just lifted the rook from d8 to d7 changes a lot of things, so we can go for the mate right away. Queen f8 with the checkmate. Okay, next one. Rook goes on e2. This is quite a famous motif. Just for those who are wondering how to play in specific situations, feel free to write down in chat, please. It's not going to harm to mention your ideas, and knowing exactly what are the best continuations, it will work out very, very well. So we can try to solve it together. So moving on to the next option. Here we have rook e2, and a classic example where opponent left the back rank unnoticed. So if you have the opportunity to bring your pieces closer, maybe say check, when your opponent has almost no pieces standing on the back rank, is going to be a game changer. So for instance, if in this situation we just go for it and play something like queen c8, the rook just left the 8th rank, and black will be forced to bring it back because there is no other good option. And right after that, we're going to take it back with the queen with a checkmate on the board. So let's go for it, and queen e8. Next example, rook going on f8. So materially, if we look at it, we are down a little bit, but it's not that big deal. It's possible to make a comeback. It depends how we play properly. So as I pointed out in the past, it's mandatory to get closer to the enemy's king. The queen, can it give a check? Yes, there are a couple of opportunities like queen g7, h7, maybe queen f8 as well, but it's not going to work out well at the end of the day because black will just respond by taking it with the rook or even with the bishop. Can we go for queen g7 or h7? Not really. We don't have any pieces supporting it at all, so we should try something else. How about we go for bishop e5 check instead? The queen couldn't do much, we understand that, but how about bring the piece there? It is actually a good possibility, because right after we play bishop e5, giving a check to the enemy's king, then black doesn't have a good motive. If bishop goes on f6, we take it back with the bishop, and white wins the game on spot. So bishop goes on e5, and right after bishop f6, we're gonna take it, and we got this. This is a simple victory. Bear in mind, taking it with the queen or the rook is not going to do anything, and bishop f6, we're again using the momentum that the queen is stopping the enemy's rook, and it kind of cuts the connection in between these pieces, which gives us a good opportunity to fight for more. So that's why here bishop f6 is going to be the victory. Next example. Rook goes on f6. This is a little bit trickier than the other ones, and we have to use some, I would say, relatively tricky options in order to deliver mate. Nothing really direct, unfortunately, when we're looking at it. If we try to go for queen g7, there is the queen supporting the bishop. How about queen takes f6? Doesn't quite work, actually. More we look at it, it becomes obvious that there is not much happening later. Okay, how about queen f7 or all the other stuff? It's not working, definitely. So what can we do then? The best shot by far is to bring the rook all the way to h8, which is going to be an absolute game changer, because right after we go for it, black is forced to take it back with the king. There is nothing else. And when the king takes it, we're using this momentum, the connection between the bishop and the queen, and we go for queen h7 checkmate. So rook h8, king goes away, and queen h7. Using this battery is quite important. It happens, I would say, relatively frequently in regular games that this opportunity arises, so try to make it work somehow. Queen h7, it's going to be mate on the board. Moving on, the next one, rook e8. So, as we said last time, using the back rank is one of the most common technique to push for the victory, and this is not an exception in this case. So we need to do something about it. If you go for rook e8 check, this is the first move which comes in mind, and probably you're wondering, well, why not? It just looks amazing. Like, there is nothing my opponent can do about it. But actually, the thing is that after that, the king comes up on g7, and it's quite difficult to deliver mate there. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe the channel. It helps the algorithm. It's just still a new channel. Me and Arkady are doing it on daily basis. It's been quite some time, so we definitely need your support on our journey. If you're interested to check out some educational content at some point, we are planning to work on not only the educational one, but also we will be working on some playing the games, entertaining, etc. So it's definitely worth it to follow us. Anyhow, here after rook e8, we have got another idea. Rather than taking it, we can try to go queen f6. And no other checks should be looked around and kind of unforgiven there. We just would love to navigate through with these checks. And what is black going to do? Can't really come up on g7 because we're covering it. But how about king g8? That's actually the only shot what black has got. But right after that, we'll be playing rook e8 with the checkmate on the board. The king can't come up. The rook is not doing anything, therefore white is simply winning. So we grab this, and then we go for rook e8 with a checkmate on the board. Next example. Oh, knight a6. We have got some pieces on the board, and it looks like a couple of good opportunities as well. We can't really claim that everything is under control in this case, and black has it covered. Yes, they do indeed have the extra queen on the board, but it just changes nothing because of the fact that this king is really weak and many pieces can attack at the same time. What are the options? Rook d8 is one of them. bishop h6 is a possibility, along with bishop a3 as well. If we go for rook d8, our opponent has this move, king coming on g7. If we try to go for bishop h6 check, it looks tempting on the first glance, because after king g8 there is knight e7, the knight delivers mate while the bishop is covering up everything. But the problem is that there is king going on e8 square, and there we don't actually have a good follow-up. That's why it's better to start with rook d8, because let's say even if we try to go for something like bishop a3, there comes b4, and I don't even know what comes next. Black has everything under control and seems like we don't have anything going on. But on the other hand, if we go for bishop h6, and let's say the king goes on g8, it's mate, but if we start with rook d8 check, the king cannot escape on e8 nor on e7, and can come on g7, but that doesn't change anything, because right after that we're going to include bishop h6 check, and the king is kind of staying alone, no way to go on any good squares. So with the combination of the rook, knight, another rook on h4, and the bishop, all together we can deliver a checkmate on the board, which actually is the best shot. So rook d8 followed by bishop h6, and white wins the game. Next example, king going on g4. What is going on right there? Well, it's quite scary position because the enemy has two rooks, and when we're trying to compare the queen to two rooks, maybe we can say that they're doing fine, but actually it's not that simple, because if we let this rook to wake up, two rooks usually are preferable than the queen. Of course, it depends on the situation and on many other aspects, but as a rule of thumb, this is how it usually goes. So how do we play in this situation? Well, we can try to go for h3, give a check to the enemy's king, and what is black going to do? Well, king f4, I guess, is the only possible opportunity right now, because right after we played king f4, we can try to tack the queen back on h4, go for queen c7, couple of options, but we really need to hurry up, because the moment we allow rook f4, it's just lost. That's why we need to start with h3. Sorry, I just misclicked h3. The king goes on f4. We are going to play queen back on h4, because we can try to give this check, but black has a couple of options to defend it. Therefore, we come from this direction, say hi to this king, which can't go back. These rooks are terribly located, and it's easier for white to make a checkmate. Let's go for the next example. Queen e6. Do you remember what we said with the queens when you really want to deliver mate in the situations? We need to do our best to bring the queen as close as possible to the enemy's king, and this way we can easily make mate. How can we do that? What are the easiest steps to make it work? Well, if we go for queen h4 check, that leads to king f3, and white's king kind of escapes. If we go for queen f4 check, the white goes king h3, but then we have a good follow-up with queen h4 checkmate. So that actually just works out well. Some other options like queen e3 is an interesting approach, but the king escapes on h2, and there's nothing happening later. Queen e1 would lead to king h2 as well. So we go for a queen f4 check, and right after king h3, queen h4 checkmate. Here we go. The king can go backwards on g2. Nothing is actually happening there, thanks to the pawn covering up the critical square, and black's queen on e6 just looks like a spectator, not doing anything at all, which is a really good sign for us, easier for black to win the game. Next example, g6. Attacks the knight. Well, we have a couple of good options. It's not like there is only one move which just works and that's it, and nothing is just happening anymore. There are a couple of good opportunities, but we need to pay attention to a little detail. The fact that enemy's king is quite badly located to g8, and black does try to go for this g6, but it just changes nothing at all. We can go for the mating ideas. Not with knight h6, not with knight e7, because black just comes up. But rather than that, we go for queen e8 check. we force the enemy's rook to grab it on e8, because there is physically nothing else left. And when that happens, we are happy to grab it back with the rook on e8 ourselves. So we go for this check, rook takes e8, and this game is over. That's a nice example indeed. Next one, knight e6. Well, we are about to get checkmated, right? Always pay attention to your opponent's last moves. We see the knight coming on e6, which is not necessarily so good idea. So we kind of need to play it properly. Well, after going for knight e6, queen g7 mate, we're like thinking, okay, maybe a rook f7 or rook d7 looks like slightly preferable option. But in any case, like we are covering up this square on g7, but where's the attack? We need to go after our enemy's king 100%. How is it possible? We can go for rook f1 check, and if bishop goes on e1, we can take it. And if the knight takes on f1, we can go for rook d1 with a simple checkmate. So we wanted to start with rook d1 originally, but it's not possible because the knight is on the way. And this is one of those deflection motif when we force the enemy's knight to go away, and then we include rook d1 on the board. So we go for rook f1 check, and okay, white could try to take it with the knight, which leads to rook d1 mate, and there is bishop e1 as well, which also works out well because we're just going to take it on e2, and it's just a checkmate on the board. Next one. Whenever you see your opponent having extra material on the board, let's say as it is in the current situation, our opponent definitely is doing extremely well. The pieces just look nice. Maybe queen d8 is going to come on the very next move. We need to somehow hurry up and make a move instantly. How is it possible? The best possible approach to fight against having an extra material for your opponent is to go with the most direct moves. Rook h4, not really, because the pawn stands there. Rook h2, we're not quite there yet, because the king is taking it. But how about we press the pawn forward, which actually looks quite nice, because right after we go for it, only move for white is to go king h4, and we use this momentum to deliver mate in one move right away with rook to h2. Why not? It looks quite nice. Next one. Here we go for king h2 as the last option. Well, clearly something is happening to this king, right? We can sense that the second rank is quite weak, maybe some check, this bishop is doing really great, the queen is covering up this diagonal as well. Altogether, something immediate should be happening. And we actually get a chance to make it work. We just need to go for that direction. Queen can give a check on e2, d2, whatever, all the squares, but at least to know we're good. On the other hand, we can try to bring the rook. Always try to bring the piece which is not doing anything in the current situation to your enemy's king. Because whatever is already doing something, they're busy. But if one of your pieces just on vacation doing absolutely nothing at all, it's preferable to bring it closer. So we go for rook f2 check. And what is white going to do? In case of rook takes f2, we can go for queen takes f2. And luckily, this bishop is covering up the whole diagonal. And in this case, queen f2 is going to be the winning combination. Next one. And the queen goes on d7. Well, what should we do now with the white pieces? Let's pay attention to black's threat. The last move was queen d7. What does he want to do? The queen actually can jump on h3, which is a really bad news for us. So what do we play then? We don't have enough time to protect it by playing a move like g4, f4. In a real game, maybe yes, you need to consider it. But when we see the current situation, and I tell you that we need to make a checkmate in 2, it's really tough to focus on something else because there should be something the most direct as much as possible in the situation. And actually, we got this. We can go for bishop takes f6. Why? Because if we go rook g8, the king can take it, and potentially there is no good follow-up. So we take on f6 while waiting. If the king goes on h7, there is a mate on h8. And if the king takes on f6, we go queen e5. There's nothing black's king can do about it, and it's a simple mate on the board. So we take on f6, king takes, and queen e5 is a very beautiful combination of the rook and the queen, because right after we go for this queen e5, it covers up the key square on g7, so the king cannot hide anywhere. We are covering up all these files, let's say the horizontal and the file as well at the same time, and that's it. It's just game over. Queen e5 with the mate on the board. Next example. White recently pressed the pawn on f3, and black pressed the pawn on f3, and white decided to capture it. Well, usually when you see that some files are getting opened up along the file, it's important to look for some direct continuations. Does queen g2 work out well? Not really. Rook can take on g2. Can we go for queen g1? Yes, but our enemy's rook is going to capture on g1, and what do we even have next? Is there even something happening? Well, actually, we get the idea of that. We can try to go for queen g1, because when the rook takes it, the combination of the rook and bishop will be deadly for the enemy's king. So we can try to take it with the rook, then the king will have no escape road. Meanwhile, it's mate on the board. So rook g1 with simple checkmate, no escape road whatsoever. Next one. Queen going to f6. Well, it's a little bit tricky situation because black is ahead materially, they have an extra rook, but as you can see, this king is really alone. Almost no pieces defending, and if we use the correct combination, we can deliver mate with faster options. If we go for queen f6, the rook is going to take it back, and almost nothing comes up next. If you go for queen takes f8, queen will take it back. It does look like this combination along the h file should be decisive, and we must do something about it. If we try to move the bishop away, let's say on e4, it's a good looking check, because if king g8, we can go queen e7 with the checkmate, but the problem is that our queen is hanging. And right after we go for bishop to e4, black is just going to grab it on h6, and we get absolutely nothing at all. But on the other hand, we can actually move the bishop onto a square, which will keep the queen protected at the same time. And that's exactly when we play bishop to g6 check. And what is black going to do? The king went on g8, and that's the correct momentum. We go for queen h7. It's well protected by the bishop, and our enemy's king has no chance of survival. That's why it's a mate on the board. Ladies and gentlemen, so far, how is it going? Let me know in the chat. Is it complicated or is it fine? What do you recommend to work on specifically? Maybe you want to go over with the easier stuff, perhaps, or something a bit more of a challenge. Just let me know in chat what you think about it. Hello, Ernur, queen h7. Yes, you're absolutely right. Also, tell me, what is your rating? If you are playing on online, let's say on DChess or maybe on Chess.com, perhaps you're participating in the tournaments already over the board, which is a good, really good sign. So let me know your feedback on that so we can try to improve it, and it's going to be much easier for our viewers later to adjust the level. So let's see. Okay, going back to the puzzles. Bishop e7. What's going on this bishop e7? Rook on a1 is gone, but we don't really care about it because, as you can see, there are quite a lot of pieces attacking the enemy's king on e8, and just one good direction will give us everything needed. So what do? We can try to go for queen f8, but it's not working because the bishop takes it back, and maybe knight f6, but the queen will take it. So do we have some sort of combination of these two moves that we can make mate into? Anyone in chat? Fine, I guess you meant that it is fine examples and not too challenging, which is good to know. So here, we can actually go for knight f6 check first, which is a mandatory move to start with, because right after that, black is forced to take it back with the bishop. And do you remember what the bishop was doing on e7? Yes, it was covering up the f8 rook. And we can force the rook to bishop to go away, and we are going to play queen f8 with the checkmate immediately. And thanks to the knight, we distracted the enemy's bishop. Now it's significantly easier to do the rest. We're just going to take it, captures, and we go for queen f8 mate. I don't think it was that difficult. I think you got this indeed. And we can try to move on. Yes, knight f6. Absolutely, Rafi. You got this. Next example. Can we make a checkmate in two? Knight comes on e5. Well, the queen is under attack. So as the bishop coming on f7, that might be a deadly combination, though. It looks quite bad, but we actually have a chance to strike back and do something really, really good right now. What is it? Okay, in these situations, when you see that your opponent is threatening a lot of things, it's less likely that you can protect everything at once. Usually, you need to try to create even more dangerous threat and go for the direct attack immediately. You can try to go for knight g3 check, and when the king goes on g1, we can try to follow up with queen g2 right away. The king can't do anything, and it's just going to be a checkmate. Knight g6, yes, I do believe you meant knight g3, and that's absolutely correct way to play. We go for queen g2, and it's going to be a checkmate immediately. No, sorry, yes. Okay, how about this example? I will let you guys think about it if you can solve it. Just curious, how many people in chat can solve this type of positions? Give me the suggestions, please. Let's say, which move can we start with? Usually, I would recommend you to start with checks, because this is something what you would like to do long term. And maybe we have a chance to make it work. How should we proceed further? Up to you to decide. Go on, please. Try to be active in chat. It's going to be much, much better. So I will know exactly what level you're having. What do you think, guys? Also, for those who just recently joined us, please don't forget to give the stream a like button. It helps to spread it, and subscribe if you haven't done so. Me and another person, Grandmaster Arkady Naidich, are doing educational content for you. So it's early stages. It definitely is very important, your support right there. Okay, so after rook e6, what should we do? We have two types of checks, normal ones. Okay, b5 just doesn't work. Rook c3 is also quite bad. How about we start with rook e4 check? That actually looks good, but white can just try to go for a king d5, or the king can go down back on d3. Especially king d3 is the most painful, and it does look like we are just letting him to escape. And is it something we would like to do? I don't think so. How about some other ideas? Do we have it? Yes, actually we can try another check, knight a5. Why knight a5? Because only move is king d5. And just because of the weird placement of the pieces that our opponent has, the pieces, the pawn on e5, the rook on e6, and rook on e6, we can make a checkmate with rook d3. No square on e4, the pawn is guarding it, no other stuff as well because the knight is covering it up, and black just wins the game immediately. Pretty nice one, no doubts. Next one. Hello, Endomon Gambit. Welcome on board. Thanks for joining us. Rook a3. Well, as you can see, black has a vicious attack. We can't let our king down. Some immediate action needs to be taken. What can we do? Can we potentially try to go for maybe rook g7 check? Well, to start with, it's probably not too bad, but the rook is going to take it and nothing's going to change. How about the other options? Do we have it? Let's say, can we go for maybe queen g6 check? That actually looks way more promising. Because right after that, if the king tries to escape on h8, we've got queen g8 with mate on the board. Because if the king goes somewhere else, king doesn't have any other square, sorry, my bad. And queen g8 is a really good momentum because the bishop is blocked by its own rook. So we can use this time to deliver a very important checkmate on the board. So here we are. Queen g6, king h8 with queen g8, mate. Next one. Okay, this is quite difficult though. Knight e3. Well, is there really something? Because our opponent's king looks quite safe. How do we even give a check? The pawns are standing there and looks like black has got the whole fortress when no pieces can get through. Actually, we have a good opportunity for that. If we move the bishop away, it's not going to change much because black is going to take on c2. But what we can try is grabbing on h7 right away. And this is going to be a queen sacrifice, which is quite a ballsy move. When giving up a queen, you should always try to double check everything. One mistake and you just play the position queenless. And queenless positions will not work out well. Probably you will need to resign in a short order. So let's go for something immediate. And yes, indeed, queen takes h7 works really well. And when the king takes it, we can use the combination of the rook and bishop together, which is going to be a really brutal one for the enemy's king, and play bishop f7 with checkmate on the board. Just because the g6 and g8 squares are well covered, g7 is controlled by its own king, and the king is dead. Next one. How about the rook going on d8? Well. What can we do? Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any recommendation in chat, feel free to write it down. It will be better to have more interactive chat. So it will be easier for us. So what do you think? Is there a way to make a mate? I'll give you a couple of seconds. Take your time. Okay, here we have a recommendation of playing bishop to e7, which is a good looking one, by the way, because actually if we just go for bishop e7, we want to take here next. And if our opponent takes it with the knight, we get rid of the defender and we can play queen d8, but there is one problem. Go bishop e7, black has this intermezzo, can grab our queen on d3, and well, what do we get at the end? Nothing. So bishop e7, rook d3, and if we take it back, there is knight e7, And not only it's not mate, unfortunately we'll lose, but we can go for the queen sacrifice, which is queen d8. And well, all of a sudden, it's going to be a mate. How is black going to deal with it? Bishop d8 is the only shot, right? Because the king can take thanks to the rook, which is just supporting it. And when the bishop takes back, we can go for rook d8. And again, this guardians of the bishop is quite decisive, and white wins the game on spot. Nice one. Well done, ladies and gentlemen in chat. I see that you are commenting, supporting, and you actually got this puzzle correctly. That's a really, really good one. Try to be active. Please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Let's go up to 10 likes. I do believe we are capable of doing it. It gets pushed more by the algorithm, so more people can join us. Moving on to the next example. E1 queen. Maybe you're thinking that, oh my god, my opponent has two queens. How am I going to even do anything? Black has just an extra queen. But come on, we all know that it's not as simple as it looks like, right, on the board. So we have some ideas to be quite tricky. If we try to grab on e1, that leads to nowhere, right? The queen is going to take it, and then we might even need to trade off the queens, and at the end of the day, we just lose the game due to insufficient material for anything. How about some other ideas? Okay, my opponent did promote on e1, but maybe I've got some opportunity to go after the enemy's king somehow. Because at the moment, these queens are quite distracted. So we can look for the move like queen f7 check. Why not, actually? But you know what's the main downside? The downside is that the king just goes on a8. And what do we do next? There is nothing. No checkmate, unfortunately. We wish there would be mate, but there is not. So is there a better way, ladies and gentlemen, that we can try to make it work, maybe? Perhaps a different kind of check we can do, and it's going to be much, much better. Any thoughts? I'm confident you can find it. Yes, indeed. Queen a6 check, which is absolutely right. And why is it a good move? Well, because whenever we go for queen a6, we are forcing the enemy's king to go on a8. Whenever you're trying to solve mate in twos, or in general, being down materially quite a heavy load, always try to look for some tricky alternatives. So we go for queen a6. King couldn't go on b8 or c7 because the bishop was covering, and also this pawn was really amazing. But now, regardless of our opponent having two queens on the board, which you already know is a heavy material on the board, it's not the end. We can play queen c8, and it's going to be mate on the board. Black promoted to two queens, but they left the king unguarded, which we used it, and we went for the win. Excellent one. Okay, moving on to the next one. As I see, we can make it work, and we made the rook. Yes, indeed. Hello, Kartik KR. Welcome on board, everyone. Thanks for joining. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe. This is very important. It helps the algorithm a lot, and it is highly appreciated. So we can do more entertaining content for you. King goes on h4. What do we have here? Can we go for rook h2 check? Maybe, but the king goes on g5. Is there anything else we can do? Okay, perhaps take the pawn or bring the rook or something like that, but it's too slow. We need something immediate. We really, really want to make sure that something quick comes up on spot. And this is the momentum. We got bishop f6 check. We just want to make sure that the king is not escaping to g5, nor any other squares, and the king can come down on h5, which leads to rook h2 with a mate on the board. So let's go for bishop f6. It's very important to cover up all the key squares, and I do believe that this white king is very mad at its own pieces, because as you can see now, we're facing the situation where the pieces are just restricting the mobility of the king and can't really go anywhere. So how about we just go rook h2, and it's just going to be mate. That's a good one. We have done something similar. Yes, Rafis, exactly the same one. We haven't done it, but something similar, yes. So these are quite similar. You know, whenever you learn the patterns of how to make checkmates and which variations we need to choose and so on, it's much, much easier for us to navigate through, no doubt. Okay, what do we do next? Do we have a good way to move on? Any recommendations? Don't forget the fact that we just gave up the queen, guys. It's not a joke. Like, when you give up such a heavy material, you need to have something direct prepared. Otherwise, it makes absolutely no sense to keep playing it. Well, how many checks do we have? Well, bishop h6, maybe, but the king goes on g8. Rook f7 is not there because the rook is pinned to the king. And even if we would have that opportunity on the board, it still changes nothing at all. So how about we go for rook takes h8? That's a good looking option because it forces the black's king to come up on g7. But there we go, bishop f6, which actually is absolute game changer. The bishop will be protecting the rook at the end of the day, and the king can't escape on any of the squares thanks to the rook. Actually, it's an amazing piece. Covers up every single key opportunity of the game, and it's much, much easier for us. That's why bishop f6 mate on the board. Okay, next example, queen takes f7. Someone left the king unnoticed. There is nothing happening. Maybe whenever you see the pawn on h3 and the queen nearby, the first thing which comes in mind, and I definitely do not blame you at all, is if we go for some kind of queen f3 maybe, or queen going on e4, but okay, we all know that it's not going to work out well because if we try it, there's going to be queen takes. If we go queen e4, it also will be captured. But what is this? Like, what can we do then? The queen is coming down on e8, f8, but we have one great opportunity. Queen takes g3, check. Using the fact that the pawn is pinned, and after queen g3, white is forced to move the king on h1, which allows us to go for queen g2. It's a beautiful one, and a lot of people do think that this pawn is protected, but definitely not. Absolutely not protected at all. So we go for a queen g3, and when the king goes on h1, queen g2 with the checkmate on. That's a beautiful one indeed. How about the next one? Queen d5. Well, as we can see, we are going to go for the attack to the enemy's king. We're not live anymore. Deja vu. Okay, so we have some technical issues, ladies and gentlemen. Just let me know in chat, please, or if you can hear me well, everything is fine. Or is it really the deja vu what you have? I believe we should be fine. Yes, we are live. All set. It's all right for me. Okay. So queen e5. Well, we can't bring the queen on g2, even though we would love to do that, because, you know, I mean, okay, we can try to go for it, but what's going to happen next? Nothing at all, just because the queen is going to enter the game and we'll capture it. How about we bring the rook on g2? And actually, we have seen the similar pattern. because the queen is blocking another queen, not letting it to have a good connection to it. Therefore, rook g2. White will be forced to move it back on h1, but we need a good follow-up, which is going to be queen h3 with a mate on the board. So that's a quite nice motive and relatively famous at the same time. Okay, next example. Knight takes d5. Well. Position is not that simple, but we will try our best to make it as simple as possible. We have two main opportunities. Either we need to take g takes f5, f7, or g takes h7. One of them is going to be correct because we are down two pieces and we can't just kind of get away with it. If we go for g takes h7, white can open up the g file, and the rook and the queen together is going to be a monster combination. So we capture it, and when the king either takes it or goes away, we can go for queen g7. But here comes the question. Why not g takes f7 then? If the king goes away, there's going to be queen g7 with mate. Well, there is a little bit of difference, because if we take here, rook can take it back, which protects the king because the rook is covering up the g7 square. That's why we take on h7, king takes, and we strike immediately with queen g5, and black can't do anything anymore. White wins the game on spot. That's a beautiful one indeed. Next example, king goes on g5. What do we do in this situation? Well, the king kind of stands alone, so if we have a chance to strike, we definitely would not mind. What should we do? Any recommendations, ladies and gentlemen? There must be something going on to this king 100%, and we should do our best to make it work. Anything? We have some good recommendations in chat. I like it a lot, and yes, we should do that exactly as you recommend, guys. So we go for rook f5 check. There is no other good option, because if we try to promote the pawn, maybe rook is going to take it. And let's not forget about the fact that we need to deliver mate in 2. So how are we going to make it if we can't even give a check on the next move? So we start with rook f5, it's well guarded by the pawn, and if the king goes on any of the squares on h4 or h6, surprisingly on both scenarios rook h5 will finish the game immediately. So rook goes on f5, and after king h6, rook h5 with the checkmate. That's a really nice one though. Okay, how about this situation when the queen goes on b6? Do we have a good way to proceed further? It's up to you to decide. Can we make it work? We have seen the similar idea in the past, where we discussed about the fact that the queen is kind of cut. We can't really get closer, cannot really control the squares. Maybe we can use this momentum. Is there a way to do that? Yes, indeed, you got this right. We can actually go for rook takes g6. This king is standing alone. We must go for it. So we can't really play queen f7 because the rook is standing there. Queen g7 also doesn't make much sense. So we go rook g6. If the pawn takes, there comes queen g7. So black takes it, and we are going to play queen g7 with a checkmate on the board. Beautiful one indeed. Next one. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go up to 10 likes. Just 3 likes remaining. Give it a thumbs up and support the channel. Queen e5. Well, we have seen kind of we're seeing this motif over and over again, as you noticed, actually, because we just go for the sacrifices back and forth. How do we use this momentum? Any thoughts? What do you think about Sakura, my cat? Look at that. She's really interested what's going on in this situation and is wondering which move to make right now. Sakura, what do you think? Will you support us? Which way we need to play? Just tell us the move, we will take care of it. She says rook takes g7 is the best shot. Let's go for it. Yes, true. Why not? She wants more complicated puzzles, right, Sakura? You want more complicated puzzles? Yes, she doesn't mind, actually. She said, bring it on. No issues whatsoever. So, if we go for queen g7, the queen is protecting it. But on the other hand, if we take it with the rook on g7, king can't go on fate because of queen f7. If the king escapes, we have another check on h6 with mate. So we are going to make it work with, oops, I misclicked, with queen h6 with a checkmate on the board. Let's have a look at the next example. She's definitely waiting for mate scene 4. Sakura, should we do that? Eventually, make it more complicated? Maybe. She's a bit bored looking at mates in 2. Well, what do we do here? There are some good ways to play. And it seems like making checkmates with the rooks is very common. I have no idea why, but it is. So, what do we do? Well, in this situation, we can't really give this check because black is going to escape on a fate. And the farther it goes from us, the worse the situation becomes. We need to try to keep the king stuck inside the cage as soon as possible. That's why another rook going on g6 makes way more sense. And black is only left with one option, which is king h8. And that's exactly the moment we're going to play rook f8 with the checkmate. Because the rook is covering up the key move for the king. And on the other hand, this check is going to be definitely decisive. Let's go for it. Okay, the next one, rook c2. I just mentioned about the rook mates, and it seems like Lichess can understand it and really wants to go over and just check out the positions with rook mates alone. That's quite interesting, though, and unexpected at the same time. Let's have a look. What can we do? If we go rook d8 check or rook h5, we need to see there has to be some sort of combination between these two moves to make it work. If we go for rook d8 check, there comes king h7, and we don't have a good follow-up because if we go rook h5, the king escapes on g6, and this is quite unfortunate. But if we start with rook h5 check, we force the enemy's king to go on g8, and then we can try to bring the rook all the way to d8. And that is going to be a completely different story. So we go for rook h5 check, king g8, and then rook going on d8. I don't think there is much left for black, so white wins the game on spot. Next one, e takes d6. Okay, I know we have a lot of pieces on the board, but it's not still that difficult. We can try to make it work somehow and make a checkmate. Anyone? Any thoughts how to do it? I'll give you a couple of seconds. Take your time, please. Guys, also let me know what is your rating if you play on Lichess or you usually play even over the board tournaments as well. Just tell me basically how things are so I can determine your regular level. Rook g6, queen h3. So it seems like this is a tricky version. There are a couple of responses, as I can see in chat. And actually, 2100 on Lichess, that's a really good rating, though. 1700. How about the others? Write it down, don't be shy. Well, we need to go after the king 100% as soon as possible because we are going to get mated ourselves. Look at that. Some d takes c7, maybe d7, whatever. Plenty of opportunities. But we can go for a queen h3 check. And when the bishop takes, we have rook takes h3. And the good part is that we give a check, plus the king cannot go on g1 because of the bishop, and nor on g2 because the knight is covering up this key square as well, which leads to easily winning for black. So we take it, and that's it. GG, game over. Next one, king going on h2. By the way, 1400 and 1700. So you're playing different time controls, it seems. King going on h2. Oh, that's a really, really tricky one, guys. It does look like some normal moves don't work, nor knight f1. And you're probably wondering, how am I going to make a checkmate? The queen can't give a check because rook c8 is also coming. Am I in trouble? Even because we're down a piece as well. Not only making a checkmate in 2, the position is actually worse if we don't have this mate. These are the hardest ones to solve. So what do we do in this situation? Which technique should we use? Somebody mentioned the horse jumping on g4. You are absolutely right. Somehow we really want to make queen h4 checkmate work because the queen is doing absolutely nothing at all. So we have this beautiful combination, knight g4. White is forced to take it, and all of a sudden, this h file gets opened up for us, and we can make a mate. That came out of nowhere due to the pawn change, but we definitely don't mind because it works out well. The next one. What should we do after f5? There are a couple of pieces in the attack, and it doesn't look like black has a lot of pieces protecting its own monarch. So, which piece gets activated to make a mate on the board? Ladies and gentlemen, any recommendations in chat? My rating is 450. Keep it up. Keep it up. You're going to make it work. When did you start playing chess? Guys, when did you start playing chess in general? Is it quite common? Is it quite recent? Or it's been a while? Maybe you had some break in between. I've seen a lot of people actually having the breaks in between. At some point they played chess, then they had a couple of years, or even in the high school back in the day they used to play, and they just left and they're trying to make a comeback. In 2020, this year. Okay, I see. So we have a couple of answers. 2020, okay. So the COVID era, I guess it was a big boom of the social medias in chess, and a lot of people started playing chess because of that. Rook g6, yes indeed, we go for it, attacking the king and waiting where the king goes on f7 or h7. If the king goes on f7, we can go for a queen g7 mate, and if the king goes on that direction, regardless, we have the checkmate coming. So we start with this and we go for queen g7 next. That's a good example. How about the next one? In school, I was a champion. Very nice. Okay, g takes f3. Always, ladies and gentlemen, if you face this type of situations, we should try our best to go directly to the enemy's king and look at the last move and pay attention. Maybe something is happening in this area. Perhaps some check you can give, or there is some kind of mating thread or something like that. Pay attention to these details. It is quite important. So, what do we do? Well, actually, we have very active chat today, as I see, and a lot of people want to tune in. Yes, indeed, queen h4 should be played, and wherever the king goes, let's say on e2 or f1, we can make a mate on f2 coming up, and white can't really do much. Indeed, give a check, king comes up, and queen f2 with an easy checkmate on the board. Beautiful mate, no doubt. Can you do mate in 3 puzzles? For this stream, we will stick with mate in 2s. We will just check out roughly 5-6 more positions, and that will be it for today. But for the next ones, we will try to increase the difficulty and see how people will react on that. So, it seems like sacrificing the rook is a very common motive. If you go for queen h8, the king comes on e7. Go queen d7, the same motive. Queen d8, maybe there will be knight d8, but we can try to go for rook d8 instead. And if the knight takes it, we're going to grab it with the queen, with the mate on the board. So we give a check, knight takes, and queen d8 with a checkmate. That's a good one, and it definitely works out well. The next one coming up. Well, bishop f4. We have seen something similar, and especially in the combination as well. Who will be the first one to point it out? Which way should we play, ladies and gentlemen? What's the best possible shot here? Take on g2. Well, are we sure that we need to take on g2? You know what white is going to do if we take it? If you go rook g2, the king can come up. And it doesn't work. Because the king protects it, guys. That's the problem. But if you give a check, and the king can even go down, and when we go there, there might be bishop h2 as well. So how should we start? Start is very important in this scenario. We can actually start with queen h4 first. Yes, you're absolutely right. And then forcing the enemy's king to go down on g1, because there is nothing better than that. And right after this move, we have got rook g2 checkmate. That's a nice one. Next example. Okay. King went on h2, h4, which is oddly placed, and it is kind of stuck, as you can see, because black's pieces are not really supporting the king as much. But on the other hand, if we don't rush, there's going to be queen h3 themselves, right? So, I mean, do we really want to go for it? No, we need to hurry up. Queen h6, you're absolutely right. And now rook needs to take it on h6, which leads to rook h6 later, and the king has no escape road. Takes it, and rook takes it back. Okay, the next example, let's see how you will handle it. Just curious, who will be the first person solving it? Say the first move and the second move as well. Who will be the fastest? Bring it on, guys. Try to hurry up. We go for... Which one? Which one? Yes, 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 yes. Queen h5. Yes, indeed. That's the way to go, no doubt. Because it forces the enemy's king to go back to g8. There is no other good way. And we are using the fact that the rook is pinning the knight. So after this check, king g8, we have got queen h8 coming up with a mate on the board. And white actually wins very comfortably. Okay, we have got 3 more puzzles coming up. See who will be the main hero of the day. I see a lot of comments. People are tuning it. I like it. Give it a like, ladies and gentlemen, the live stream. Subscribe if you haven't done so to not miss out our regular educational streams. Sometimes about the checkmates, sometimes endgames, defense, review of the tournament, especially the World Cup, which is probably nowadays the most interesting competition which is happening, and all eyes are on this tournament. So yeah, it's really a good one. And also tell me, guys, who do you support actually in the World Cup? Who do you think will qualify on the next stage? Here, after rook c8, we actually have the opportunity to go for rook f7 check right away. And you're absolutely right. We need to force the enemy's king to go down on d8. It is well guarded by the pawn. King can't go backwards on e8. And when the king goes on d8, we're going to bring the rook on d7 with a mate on the board. And the king has nowhere to escape. Next one. King running on h2. We have something. But honestly, no reason to say the move if you don't say the follow-up. You're absolutely right. That is actually absolutely correct mindset, because this is how it should be. A lot of times, in the calculation process especially, if you're looking at one line and then you go into a little bit more of the depth and you see that, okay, you know what? You don't say what your opponent responds, but during the game you realize that there are more than one move as the response from your opponent. Then how do we make a checkmate? Or what is next? You might miss something very annoying, actually, guys, that you might not want to be doing it at all. So it's mandatory indeed. Bishop g3, definitely the best shot, no doubt. Forces the king to come up, and there is rook h1 coming up next, and we win the game immediately. So, what should we do next? The final position of today. Who can guess it? Who will be the last man standing? Who is the last man standing? It is the 50th puzzle we are covering for today. Rook sacrifice. You're absolutely right. We need to go for rook takes f1. The rook can take it back because it's pinned to the king, but the king needs to grab it on f1. But right after that, we're going to play queen d1 with the checkmate on the board. Very beautiful, forcing the enemy's king to get closer, and right after that, the game is over. Like wins on spot. Quite nice one. Well, that should be the end of the stream. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining. It was a pleasant stream. You have tuned in, a lot of comments. I appreciate your support. We will have some other streams coming up with the Grandmaster Arkady Naidic as well, former 2700 rated player, super Grandmaster, and bear in mind that some more interesting stuff will be on the way. Thank you everyone for watching. You can check out the previous streams as well. We have a couple of recorded versions for mating 2s, mating 1s as well. And there are some others about the defense and some other concepts too. And it's okay. Eventually, Canelius people will come. It's a new channel and we are trying to build it up. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.